So in this video, I want to share with you how I got my graduate job. And if you're watching this video and you watch some videos on my channel, you know that I make a big distinction between graduate jobs and graduate schemes. They are two different things. And I like to keep them separate as well because it's easier to explain concepts and how to get into one and how to get into the other. So just for those of you who don't know, graduate job, what I mean by graduate job is something that's not a graduate scheme. So it requires you to have a degree, but they don't give you like a structured training. It's less paid than a graduate scheme, and there's no like formal scheme. It's not like a 2-year scheme where you go into different departments. It's just a job that's looking for someone who's like an assistant or a junior level in that particular role. Yeah, so I did a video recently talking about how I got my internship placement year, and I did the placement year at Network Rail, and that's basically where I did my graduate job as well. Because in my final year of university, I actually failed 2 modules, right? So I wasn't like a high flyer, I was a very average student, and I actually ended up failing 2 modules. And what that meant was that I didn't actually get my degree in the year that I was supposed to get it. There were two modules that were outstanding. I had to resit them, and in order for me to resit them, I had to pay more, right? So at that time, in that particular scenario, I didn't have a degree, but I did have an undergraduate, like I was still working towards a degree in civil engineering, and therefore that was enough for me to get into a different role within Network Rail. So I had worked in Network Rail as part of my internship as a junior civil engineer, but there was a different role which was called a CAD technician. So a CAD technician is kind of junior it's kind of like a junior level to an engineer. So a CAD technician is basically someone who draws up the blueprints. Now that requires the skill of being able to draw and design, but it doesn't actually require the skill of thinking through what it is that you need to design and the actual solution itself. You kind of get given that as a CAD engineer. You just get given that, look, this is the solution that we've come up with from a civil engineer. This is the solution that we've come up with. You just need to draw it and lay it out and make sure that it all makes sense. So it's relatively less skill than someone who's a civil engineer. They have to make some big decisions, and obviously what's going to go where, why they're going to use that material, why they're going to design it like that. So when I went for the interview, basically let's start from the start, right? So I was looking for graduate jobs and graduate schemes. I was applying to everything when I was sort of coming up to finishing my university. Now I kind of did have an idea that maybe there's a couple of modules which I've not done too well in. I might have to resit those modules. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to apply to anything and everything and see if I can get something. And where there wasn't much that I was getting, but one of the jobs that I heard back from, there were a couple that came back to me. One of the jobs that I heard back from was actually my Network Rail friends, right? So the guys that I had worked with in my internship, I emailed them and said, look, is there any jobs that you have got which I could potentially apply to? I'm coming up to the end of my university. I'm projected to get my university degree, and so I'm just kind of interested in wanting to come back to Network Rail. And because I had a really good time there. It was a really good learning experience. It was a really good company to work for as well. So I wanted to kind of go back and see if I could do something there. And they got back to me and said, yes, we do have a CAD engineer role, which will be coming live this Monday. So if you want, you can apply to that. And I said, okay, fantastic. So I actually applied to it, and they called me for an interview. It was actually the same. One of the guys was actually the person who I had worked with as part of my internship. The guy who was actually going to be my manager, I hadn't worked with him. He was a new guy. But yeah, really nice guys. Obviously, they had asked me, look, you're becoming a civil engineer. Is there any reason why you want to go for a CAD engineer role? And I kind of had to, move around that question quite carefully. And I just said, look, I'm quite interested in this type of work. You've obviously seen my design skills. I really enjoyed that type of work, by the way. That's why I got the placement year, was because I got it in the design team where I was basically designing up those blueprints and stuff, and I really enjoyed that. So I was like, look, I really enjoy it. I know that I am competent at it, and I just feel as though I've worked here before as well. I feel as though I've got some experience with the rail industry, and I think I'd be a good fit. And yeah, so there was obviously a bunch of other questions that they asked. And a couple of weeks later, they actually called me and said, you've actually got the role. So well done. And I was really happy because I was like, right, I don't know what's going to happen with this uni stuff, but I need to get into a role because I need to start earning. I want to, I want to get things moving. And you might be feeling the same way, like you're coming at the end of your uni and you just want to get into a graduate scheme, and you can't get into, graduate schemes are really hard to get onto. So another option for you is to get into a graduate job. Now, at that time, just talking money, there were graduate schemes that were offering £28,000, right? So the Network Rail graduate scheme was offering 26,500 at that time. That was a couple of years ago. The job that they gave me was on £23,000. So you can see that there was a big difference in between what they were paying me and what the graduate scheme was paying. Now, for the graduate scheme, obviously, yes, there was entry requirements, right? So I wouldn't have been able to get into the graduate scheme, even though I applied to it, but they would say, okay, where's your degree? Like, have you actually got your degree yet? Which I hadn't at this moment in time. I was just putting it down as an expected degree. Whereas these guys, this was a graduate job, and it was nothing to do with the graduate scheme. That was a different thing. That was like hosted and maintained by the central like Network Rail team. This was just a team in York which kind of had a small office, and that was it, right? They was just dealing with that one-to-one person. So that you can see kind of like the difference, and that difference is very, very visible when you have a look at graduate jobs and graduate schemes. You will see a difference between pricing. But yeah, that's just the way it is. But I was getting that experience, I was getting money, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I can't be waiting around for a year just doing nothing, or like just resitting my modules if I have to, just because I want to get onto a graduate scheme. It doesn't work like that, right? You got to start earning. So yeah, I got into the graduate job, I started working, it was full time, and yeah, that's basically how I got my graduate job. I think one of the things that helped me was doing a year out placement. That really, really helped me get into this graduate job, because the thing is, they kind of knew me already. And one of the things that you will learn as a graduate is it's not always just about your merit. It's also about the connections that you make and how you treat and deal with other people, how you work with them, how much value that you actually provide to those managers and those senior people in the company. Because if it's all just on merit, there's so many people that have merit, that have really good high grades. Just as an example, right, there was people that did end up getting the degree, didn't have to resit any modules, but they struggled to get onto a graduate job because of the competition. So they had everything. They actually ended up doing a master's instead, because they were just like, well, we can't find any jobs, we can't get into a graduate scheme. And it was quite sad to see, because I was like, you are really, really good. Like, I would expect you to get into a graduate job or a graduate scheme really, really quickly, but sometimes it's just luck as well. A lot of people that were good actually did end up getting into graduate schemes. A lot of people that were good didn't get into graduate schemes, didn't get into graduate jobs, so they were just like, you know what, we're just going to do a master's instead, which is fine as well. But it's just the way it is. So yeah, I mean, the biggest take-home learning point that I want to give to you with this is, if you want to get into a graduate job, research the company properly. Try and build a connection with the people that are there. If you can, like, add them on LinkedIn or something, that's obviously a bonus. And obviously, you have to reach out to them as well. You have to reach out to them. You have to introduce yourself. Say, look, here, this is my name. I am looking for something in the civil engineering field or whatever field it is. And yeah, that's how you got to go about it. That's just sort of my 2 cents on getting into a graduate job. But I had to kind of do that at the time, because I had to resit the modules, and then as soon as I resit the modules, I took some time off from work, I reset the modules, I did the exams, I passed with flying colours, and then the next year, I said to them, look, thank you for the opportunity, but it's time for me now to leave, because I've got my degree and I want to apply for things that are within my degree, things that I can actually apply to with my degree. And so then I went from there and I moved to a different company, which was it wasn't like a graduate job, that was more like a normal, like, professional job, because I had like a year and a half experience under my belt by that point. And if you add the internship onto it, that was another year as well. So about 2 years experience I had at that point. So yeah, then it was easy for me to move, right? But yeah, look, if you want to get onto a graduate job, one thing that's going to really help you is my graduate success pack. It's linked in the description below. Basically, you get my graduate CV and cover letter templates. You get my job tracker, and you also get my graduate Q&A document, which contains all the question and answers that you're going to be facing in the interviews section of your graduate recruitment process. So really going to help you out. If you're interested in that, it's going to speed up your graduate application process. So check it out in the description below. With that being said, thanks for watching this video. I'll see you next time.